We'll begin with responding to a few questions regarding the first lecture on international journalism. The question is, what is journalism? Let me ask you a few things. One of these is that if you have any questions after watching the videos or reading the literature that I'm sharing with you, please do write to me. The reason that we are going online is because we have to keep what we call even and equal opportunity for all the students through instruction. The reason that we are not going for a virtual classroom is that we have come to know that many of the students don't have access to internet, or they might not find usable spaces within their house, or within a particular time frame they might not be free. So we are trying to what we say avoid an information gap. So instruction will go online, but if you have any questions like the questions that I have right in front of me, one student wrote to me regarding the lecture that I had, and I'll respond to those. We can also have a Zoom discussion if you wish, or you can write to me. I can respond if I think that it's something which will help most of the students. Then I might do a video or an audio, or write a collective email to explain it. But whatever way it is. So on the one hand, to avoid information gap, the whole instruction will go online. But on the other hand, students with questions can always approach me. You can write me an email and I'll respond to that. That said, there are a couple of questions that a student asked about information which is about international journalism, the very definition of international journalism. The simplest definition of international journalism is that international journalism is in fact international correspondence. Means an international journalist is basically an international correspondent. So when we talk about international journalism, it's different than international media organizations. Like international media is all the organizations that are working with their agendas. International journalists are the people who fulfill that agenda, or some of them don't. Some of them have their humane agenda, or like people like John Pilger, for example, or they have a global agenda. They adhere to values other than their parent organizations, like Mark Tully, for example, who stayed in India, and when he was asked to leave India by the BBC, he resigned. That's why many people in the hierarchies of international media organizations think that a long-stay correspondent develops a bias towards the place where they work. And that's the problem when we talk about the Anglo-American model of journalism. One of the questions that a student asked is, what is the Anglo-American model of journalism? Like the Anglo-American model of journalism, from a structural point of view, is objective and also news-based. Like journalism is what is in news and what is objective, what is verifiable through some proper procedures. Like you can't speculate. Like you can't develop an opinion, it becomes a novel to them. That model does work, but the idea of objectivity is a very twisted idea. Like journalism was never objective. It was always giving a picture of the world, like a social reality, but like a journalistic reality of the world, which was based upon certain ideas. Some ideas were known, like the policy of a news organization, what do they want to do by investing into journalism, and also the individual's own mindset. There are journalists who try to change the global agendas, but it normally doesn't change. So that hegemony of the Western powers, basically Anglo-American, is the Anglo-American model of journalism. Now it's different from the European model. For that I can share with you a couple of articles which explain what is the difference between the European model of journalism and the Anglo-American one. But it's not simply structural. Like, it's not simply about the way you write a story, the way you develop a story. There are other political and geopolitical aspects to it, like the way the world is divided. Like, you look at the world and you say, we are in South Asia, so where are we? We are Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, I think that's it. That's South Asia. Where is Afghanistan? Central Asia. Where is Iran? Middle East. So all these are just neighbors. How could they be different? What is, for example, what is Asia? For example, when I went to the West, and I thought I was an Asian guy. I said no. Many people didn't know where I was from. Like Pakistan, where is Pakistan? Are you from India? I said no, India is another country. People knew Afghanistan. People didn't know Pakistan. Things like that. The walls in our head are basically developed through the persistent coverage of the world in a specific context. Like the oil-rich Arab sheikdoms are Middle East. How far are these from us? Like all these, the way the world is structured is basically structured by the Anglo-American model. But most important thing in the Anglo-American model is its persistence on objectivity. This brings me to another question, which, as I told you in the earlier video, that both the Anglo-American model of journalism and peace journalism will be discussed in separate chapters because they're separate chapters for all. But I just wanted to bring in some clarity. Whenever we say that we have to be objective, means that we should give all aspects of an event, of a happening, anything, and we should cover it objectively, and we should give everybody space to give their opinions. That's true. Peace journalism, for example, was always criticized because it was not objective. It was advocacy. Why? Because peace journalism was based on covering those areas which could bring harmony within a society, which are always these good things that people do. And journalists used to say, no, it's kind of conflict-sensitive journalism is the right journalism. Peace journalism is wrong because it is not objective, because it tries to look at the brighter side. So whether we have looking at the darker side means that we are doing good journalism? No. But then we went into this discussion so many times, and a friend of ours, he said, like when the American journalist covers the civil rights movement, and they just do it with all their heart, but they don't cover the white supremacists like KKK. KKK never had a platform in the US. So was that coverage objective? It was not. But it was human, it was judicious, it was truthful. So objectivity from that standpoint is a myth. So the reason peace journalism was always criticized for not being objective is absurd, because journalism is never objective. It sides with the truth or the spirit of the age, what we say. So we always adjust our narrative, but acceptable narratives are considered to be objective. The ones that are new are not considered to be objective. The ones that don't earn enough money for the media organizations or journalists are not considered to be objective. Like when we get back to the Anglo-American model, and what is happening right now is like what they call pack journalism. Pack journalism is that Western journalists living in covering a different conflict region, when they see that there is a fatigue about that area's coverage, when they see that people might get bored, they look for other conflict zones. and they move there. And then they are also, as Kevin Williams says, he criticized them really badly, that they try to just hype an event and make it important. And this is not my personal opinion, many other people say that too. The other thing is that they are never objective when they cover, because they in conflict zone, they have to live together, like they have to live in safe places, not safe houses, but safe places. And they go out and they are there to cover different organizations, 4 different organizations. They come back and they sit and they talk together. Then they develop a storyline which is quite similar. And then they send it to the dominant hegemonic structures which cover the whole world. And so all these platforms give the same view about a happening in a part of the world which is a conflict zone. So we see that objectivity is never there. So why do we take peace journalism out of the whole paradigm by saying that it is not objective? It is as objective as any other news. If you are telling fables, like fairy tales, that's wrong. But if something good is happening and you are covering it, you shouldn't be criticized for that. That's why I said in the earlier video that peace journalism was considered to be subjective. The reasons were these that I mentioned right now, which are not valid enough because the rest of the journalism is following the same patterns as peace journalism. Then there is another question which is regarding the paradox in media. The paradox means that there is more knowledge about the world right now, but there is less investment in international journalism. The main reason for that is there is not much money left to invest in international journalism. That's the biggest reason, because newsrooms are getting stricter. The print journalism is being defeated by the online media, and the online media is a platform where you don't earn much money, It's not like the print newspaper. So, for example, if you read Guardian, for example, you read an article and in the end they'll say, since you were here, you should donate. So New York, I think many of the I think New York Times has gone online, and many newspapers are dying. So the old model is no more feasible. And the same is true, the patterns, the way we tell stories is not feasible. Like social media is telling all the stories, it's the age of television. So most of the time when we talk about international journalism and long-stay correspondence, it's about a world that is far away from us, which is not true. The world is right there for you. You can just learn about any part of the world, and there is this, like the digitalization of modern mass media has also changed a lot of things. Like you don't need to invest too much into international journalism because the news is already there. What you have to do is newsrooms think that they will use that money for stabilizing other aspects of their organization, so they don't invest in international correspondence. They say, okay, let's get some stories from the stringers, let's get some stories from fixers, and let's edit it here, write a story, do crowdsourcing, meaning that you get information from many sources and you develop a story. So it has become more of a desk job. And then there is those parachute journalists. Whenever there is need, they just move in from one part of the world, land there, cover the story, move out, get out of it. So you don't invest in anything. So the reason when I say that there is a paradox, the paradox is that there is more information about the world. People know more about the world, but journalistically it's covered less. Like a parachute journalist might be earning a lot of money coming to a conflict site, but that guy will simply be covering one event. He won't be just persistently giving more information about that country, its culture, what's going on, who's important in that country. That information just vanishes right now. Last but not least, I think there was another question. There are two more questions left, if I'm not wrong. One of those is about soft power. So what is the difference between hard power and soft? Hard power is simple. It's the military might. It's your financial clout. That's hard power. You just impose your enforce your writ upon any country which is weaker than you, and you say you have to agree to that. Like countries like Pakistan are always at the receiving end. Soft power usually is considered to be kind of art and culture, like movies. Like there's a lot of talk about Bollywood industry and its influence on Pakistan, like Hollywood and the rest of the world, and how it shapes human behaviors and stuff like that. But the main source of soft power was and still is considered to be diplomacy, like embassies, people who represent different nations in different countries, who visit different countries, things like that. So that's soft power. During the Cold War and even after that, journalists were considered to be an asset to their country. So whenever they were supposed to somehow be nationalistic, they were supposed to be supporting the larger narrative of their own nation. Like a US journalist will always look for US interests. That's the soft power divided in a country between, kind of shared, not divided in a country, between the diplomats and journalists. So journalists meet people further agendas. Like there are incidences also in Pakistan where journalists were asked to visit Pakistan to bring in messages from another country. Like an Indian journalist came to meet a Pakistani head of the state to give some message. This has happened. I forgot the name, but it happens. Like these kind of bearers of news and shapers and influencers, that role is always there. This role is shrinking. Journalists are becoming more independent. They are more kind of what you say. They are more. They have their own stories to tell. So they are not very much interested, and especially the younger lot would not like work as a lackey to any embassy. So, but still there is a connection which is at work. Let me see if there is any other question left. Yes, it was about the Al Jazeera. The question was that I mentioned in the earlier lecture that Al Jazeera, despite the fact that it is giving a different narrative, still sticks to the Anglo-American model. I think I have already partly answered the question. But I was saying was that since it uses the same news construction, like it bases its idea upon newsworthiness of a news, and also keeping objectivity as the first and foremost principle, it is adhering to that model. It doesn't mean that the other models don't really rely on news. They rely on facts, but they also allow comment to shape a narrative instead of sticking to hard news, because hard news is not the whole truth. There are contexts within which news happen. So the Anglo-American model doesn't like the context. The Anglo-American model wants to put those contexts into opinion but not into news, which creates a very different environment, because you read a news which gives a different picture, and then you go to the editorial page and you say, this is the context, but this is not the news. So Al Jazeera is still sticking to that model. And more so, Al Jazeera is using basically the same political map and economic map that the Anglo-American journalism has developed. So it is working within the same cultural, what we call the journalistic culture, which the Anglo-American system of journalism has developed.